So we're watching a video called The Lost Art of Licensed Video Games. As someone who has played a ton of licensed video games, there are some that are fucking amazing. There are others that are kinda shit. So, let's look at that. Oh, was there a fucking
Hey!
skit at the beginning?
It's Halloween! The MoMA, the Reina Sofia, the Louvre. What do they all have in common? Art. That's what we're gonna talk about today. The most underappreciated, underrated, dare I say, slept on form of art in the hallowed halls of humanity's long history. I'm talking, of course, about weird licensed video games. The 80s through the 2000s.
Was that Manos the Hands of Fate? Was it that game? I know about that game. That game was fucking weird.
A period of time which saw not only the birth and proliferation of an entirely new medium of art, but also the most unhinged works that medium would ever birth. I'm talking Blade 2, the video game. The Fifth Element, directed by Luc Besson, the video game. I'm talking The Sopranos, the fucking video game.
Gotta mention Scarface, or it's yours on PS2, which is fucking expensive. I want to get a copy of it, but like when I wanted Vaporeon to fucking ship me one, it was like, yeah, it's like $50. I'm like, what the fuck?
Fucking Shrek 2, the greatest sequel to ever be written, the video game. And it all started in 1976. In Chicago. Martin Scorsese was still deep in his coke phase. Richard Donner had just dropped The Omen, and Sega had recently taken notice of one of their arcade cabinets doing crazy numbers throughout Japan. A little ditty by the name of Road Race, one of the highest grossing video games of the entire year. Quickly realizing that they had struck digital gold, Sega updated and then flipped the game into various reskins, starting with a number of motorcycle variants such as Man TT and Motocross. But it wasn't long until Sega co-founder and possible time traveler David M. Rosen foresaw a future wherein the medium of video games would become a vessel for the intellectual properties of television, literature, and film, and he had just the character.
Yeah, we don't have many licensed video games anymore. Like, the only things we have now is like shitty mobile games. We don't really have like a full, we don't have like a MCU game in like 2024 anymore. We don't have a new Star Wars game that isn't Lego Star Wars anymore. It's kind of like not really a thing anymore. It's all just mobile games now. And I think the reason why we don't have licensing is because mobile games exist. It's easier to pump out a Clash of Clans clone or some weird gotcha game or whatever on a phone rather than making a full game. The last example I can think of, and this guy may talk about this at a later point, the last licensed game I knew existed was Hotel Transylvania 3. Let me show you this really quick. Let me show this off really quick. Hotel Transylvania 3 game. So this game is weird. Let me see if I can find. Can I just look up like a Wikipedia page or something for this? I guess look at the Switch version. Sure, we'll look at the Switch version. So this was the last licensed video game based on a movie I think I've seen ever. So Hotel Transylvania 3 Monsters Overboard. This was before Pikmin 4 came out. This is a Pikmin clone. Where you have a bunch of little monsters, right? And it's like Pikmin, but with Hotel Transylvania characters. And a lot of people thought that if Pikmin 4 came out, that they would be basing some elements off of this. Another big example of like weird licensed video game influencing the main inspiration is Nightmare Before Christmas: Oogie's Revenge, where two distinct mechanics were from that game, that being a grapple hook. In Nightmare Before Christmas: Oogie's Revenge, Jack has a ability called Soul Robber. It's like a little flubber like goo thing that's stuck to his hand. He used that as a grappling hook that can use not only go through platforms but also grab onto enemies and slam them to the ground. There is also, and that was in later in Devil May Cry 4 with Nero's hand. Also, a cartwheel move that you can't spam, because if you spam it 3 times, it does like a weird jump and like doesn't it messes up your movement or something. That came back in Bayonetta for some reason. So this is kind of an example of like weird licensing no one gives a shit about, being like, oh, maybe we could take it from that because no one gives a shit about this licensed video game and put it in our thing. It's just strange seeing like these weird fucking licensed games influencing like the modern, you know, mainline games, you know what I mean?
To open the door with. Arthur Herbert Fonzarelli, aka the Fonz, one of the most well-beloved characters in sitcom history, at the crest of his popularity. In November of that year, Sega would debut Fonz the video game at the Music Operators Association show in Chicago, forever opening the floodgates between video games and the greater world of fictional canons. And a flood it would be. 1979, Star Trek Phaser Strike accompanies the launch of the first handheld.
That looks like a fucking ColecoVision controller. With the ColecoVision controller, the fucking like numpad with the fucking circle in the bottom, looks like that.
Console, the Microvision, to promote Star Trek the Motion Picture. 1982, Alien the video game hits the Atari 2600. Later the same year, E.T. the
Alien had a video game, really? Huh.
Extraterrestrial nearly kills the industry altogether, but it won't matter. There's no stopping it now. Tron, The Dark Crystal, Krull, Star Wars, Cloak and Dagger, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Back to the Future, The Goonies, Rambo, Top Gun, Labyrinth, Cobra, King Kong, Jaws, Warlock, Indiana Jones, and The Karate Kid, among others, took the video game industry by storm.
Yeah, since the NES was so popular, a lot of developers wanted to cash in on a lot of like video game movie adaptations, and that's why you have so many LGN games, why you have so many other weird stuff from like Ocean and everything. It's because the NES kind of brought back the industry, and they're like, oh, yeah, remember that fucking E.T. game? Fuck that shit. What do we do it better? You know, even though it's not better.
And the production became as inexorably linked.
The NES was the one where the most like bullshit licensed video games came from. Like, it still continued like the SNES, Genesis, PS1, PS2, sometimes PS3 was kind of when things slowed down a little bit. But like the early days of video games where anyone could just put something on a card to ship it, you know.
The proliferation of intellectual property as action figures or costumes. And it quickly became a given that for any high budget feature looking to build hype or longevity, a video game would surely follow. And they were almost all...
did fucking Sierra make a goddamn point and click based on Black Cauldron? They look like a fucking Sierra Online game. Huh.
Really, really bad. But that didn't make them not good. This is, I think, where licensed video games shine the brightest, and also where they offer the most stark contrast to the qualities I think their modern equivalents often lack, that leave them conventionally better games, but largely more forgettable ones as a result.
Oh, is that the fucking Mad Max? Yeah, there was the Mad Max license game. I remember that.
GoldenEye 007 is, I think, the perfect example of how this precarious balance really manifests itself in a work. It's a first-person shooter on one of the most obtusely designed controllers in history.
Apparently, the controller was designed from the N64 specifically with Mario 64 in mind, and everyone was kind of like, well, fuck, we'll have to do this weirdly. Like, if I ever played N64, I have an N64 console that I could maybe stream some stuff on sometime. The thing that I would do if I were to replay N64 games, get like a controller that's like redesigned. There's some stuff that are out there that is more in line with like modern controller sensibilities, but like, fuck that old controller. I fucking hate that shit.
Its visuals are sodden and indistinct, sometimes downright confusing in its lack of contrast. Its movement is simultaneously oversensitive and devastatingly sluggish. Weapon balance is non-existent. Its levels are unimaginative, and its campaign is one of the least compelling stories I've ever played through. In spite of this,
but the multiplayer
GoldenEye is one of the sickest games ever created. It's the first FPS I ever played on my friend's older brother's N64 when I was like 7, and I could tell even then that it was electric. The multiplayer is easily the highlight of the game, and principally what gives its players such fond memories of it.
Yeah, the multiplayer was like super popular.
Rush of chemicals it sends to your brain when you land your first throwing knife, or when you and a friend kill each other with a remote mines while the four of you play at a cumulative 2 frames per second, is irreplaceable. Quake 2, Team Fortress, and Unreal all released around the same time period and are demonstrably better games on a mechanical level, but the reason they haven't retained the same warm afterglow as GoldenEye is because the very flaws that plagued this game are what made it so unique and so memorable.
Well, also because the N64 was really popular with a lot of young people back then. A young person, a kid or whatever, wouldn't be like, oh boy, time to go online on Unreal Tournament 2001 on my mom's computer. Like, the concept of gaming computers wasn't really a thing back then. Like, they had some, like, the early stages of, like, gaming computers was a thing with, like, some NVIDIA cards to play, like, Unreal and everything. But, like, the N64 was kind of a whole package. So it was a lot more accessible to people who just want to play a video game than someone who has a computer that's like, I want to play Unreal. Also, internet wasn't a thing, and it wasn't as accessible as bringing some friends over to play, you know, an N64 game. Like, yes, LAN parties were a thing. They were huge. But that was mostly a young adult crowd. Kids are the people that want to consume stuff the most. It's like you have a dichotomy between kids and adults where kids have the free time to consume your media as widely as possible, but they have no spending money. They have to beg their parents to get them something. Adults, most adults anyway, have a job, but their job prevents them from playing their game. They have the money to spend on games, but they don't have the free time to use that to play games. That's why GoldenEye 007 permeates more in the modern culture than something like Unreal, because it's more accessible, basically. Like, you had to set up a lot of things to play something like Unreal multiplayer. Whereas GoldenEye, just get some controllers in the cartridge and you're fucking good to go. They don't need fucking online. What's on the internet? No, just get some people and play the game, you know?
Battle for Bikini Bottom, Shrek 2, The Hobbit, so many of my favorite memories with video games come from these weird, unpolished, but nonetheless charming interpretations of the worlds I loved as a kid. I don't think
Larry Boy and the Bad Apple is an example of mine where it was a licensing that was kind of objectively bad, but like I didn't care. It was a game and I liked it. I don't consider Kingdom Hearts to be a licensing game. That's a totally different thing. But like PK Out of the Shadows was another example of like a sort of adaptation of like some Disney stuff that was in a PS2 game. That was really nice. I do want to place... I know there's a game that a friend of mine gave me. The Cat in the Hat game is basically a Klonoa 3. And that's really fucking weird.
Anyone on the Western Seaboard has played more Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PS2 than I have.
Yep.
I would put money on that. I literally stopped being friends with one of my childhood best friends because he didn't want to play it with me anymore. My relationships live and die by whether or not I can game with a person, and that is maybe reflective of some deeper personal problems, but I'm too busy playing the Nightmare Before Christmas Devil May Cry clone to meaningfully reflect on myself or my actions, okay?
We will play Yogi's Revenge next month. Don't worry, we will play it. Either emulator or otherwise, we will fucking play it next month.
Get off my back! I'm shrinkified right now. Yeah, I know I said we played Budokai Tenkaichi 3 when you came over, but my cousin stole it, so we're playing Fight Club the video game after this instead! Recently, I decided to take some time out of my busy schedule of laying in bed and watching Star Trek until 6 p.m.
Now tell me, Commander, what is data? I don't understand.
What is he? A machine. Is he? Are you sure? Yes. You see, he's met 2 of your 3 criteria of ascension, so what if he meets the 3rd? Consciousness in even the smallest degree. What is he then? I don't know.
Okay.
Do you?
Come on, wrap it up.
Do you?
Revisit some
Do you?
Come on,
to
wrap it up.
revisit
Thank
some
you.
of those bizarre licensed games that I loved as a kid, and I honestly had more fun with them now than I did then. The Nightmare Before Christmas Oogie's Revenge is
Love this
insane.
game.
There's no jump button for some reason, just this kind of Bayonetta flip input that you have to triple press to get a jump out of, and there are no real combos in the game in spite of the fact that it's a Devil May Cry clone developed by Capcom. But it doesn't really matter because the game is hilarious. The weapon Jack uses throughout the story is called Soul Robber, and every time you use his grab attack, he yells it out like an anime protagonist. So even though the game literally broke twice and made me have to restart my playthrough, I didn't really care because my friends and I were just yelling Soul Robber over and over while I parkoured around giant lava skeletons.
Yeah.
Shrek 2 is this like funhouse mirror image of an action RPG. Its lack of ability to portray physical depth and the dramatic overtuning of random enemy AI, accompanied by the undertuning of your own party's AI, renders the game's intended approach to a bunch of its levels, like the prison break, completely useless.
I know a similar game to this is Digimon World 4. I was gonna be doing a collab with some people on Digimon World 4 like months ago, but like we couldn't get that set up. Maybe sometime we'll do Digimon World 4, but like this is kind of similar to like, it's like a Diablo clone, but with like 4 people.
There's no shot that you can actually stealth through this whole thing. I refuse to believe that is possible. The guards literally stopped pathing halfway through the level for me. That said, its cozy visuals and the distinct playstyles of each character and the goofy jokes it ham-fists into every line elevates these flaws until they become part of what makes it endearing. Its final boss fight is like actually hard, like not in a within the context of the game kind of way, but in a like the phases aren't clearly telegraphed and dying means restarting the entire ad encounter that itself takes 10 minutes each time before the real fight starts due to its mechanics kind of way. And as I was throwing myself at this wall trying to beat it for what felt like an hour, I stopped feeling annoyed by it as a flaw and started enjoying it as a joke that makes perfect sense.
Why does that fight look like a fucking MMO raid fight with the look, it's an AoE thing, whoa, like
of course the fairy
Just
godmother
wow.
wouldn't make her fight fair. That's the entire point of her character and the movie, whether or not it was intentional. I'm also in love with the Lord of the Rings games for the PS2. These kind of hack and slash dungeon crawlers developed by Visceral Games that follows the micro and macro plots throughout the movies as you control the different characters depending on which location and scene you're playing through. It was actually in my copy of Return of the King, the game, not the movie, that I first saw an interview with actors. The first time that connection was made in my brain that regular human beings make the movies my 3rd grade self loved. The game itself actually slapped.
I know there was like some alternate ending. You could play as Sauron. For some reason, I'm like, what the fuck? You could do that?
In a lot of ways. Its combat is weighty without ever feeling bogged down. The feedback from a well-timed parry or landing one of the many combos unlocked throughout the game feels substantial and rewarding, and its replayability is
if it's on PS2, I'll most likely play it if you send it to me.
Surprisingly high, and it's pretty impossible to go wrong with Howard Shore's score for the film. That said, its conveyance is almost non-existent, kind of ironic given that they're in theory among the most on-the-rails licensed games you could make. Oftentimes, you're left to cheese through levels in a way that you can tell the game isn't designed to be played through, such as the escape from Osgiliath. In larger battles, the friendly AI often get themselves stuck in the floor's collision or in random corners, and then die to enemies they could otherwise handle. And they try to follow in the footsteps of games like the Mark of Kree by doing the seamless transition from gameplay to cutscene kind of thing, but doing so with actual scenes from an actual movie, contrasted against middling for its time PlayStation 2 graphics, is just so goofy looking. But I remember it.
It is kind of neat though.
With such clarity. Before I revisited them, I remembered these games, these weird digital billboards of promotional material for kids better than I did a lot of games that I know had better construction, tighter movement, cleaner visuals, whatever. These aren't unassailable, brilliantly—
Oh, The Hobbit. I had the GBA version of it, and I was like, what am I doing?
composed works, but neither are any of my favorite movies, or books, or albums, or cars, or people, for that matter. I've had hours-long arguments with friends over favorite Kanye albums and why mine aren't the classics, or if you could take only one anime with
He uses his best album, by the way.
you to a desert island, what would it be, or whatever. And the unifying theme across them is that I have a great deal more affection for imperfect things than I do their opposites. I just think along the path towards a higher standard of video game, licensed or otherwise, a lot of the minutia and the eccentricities that I love about the medium have started to sort of disappear and perfectly serviceable but wholly unremarkable to me works have begun to take their place. I've bought the last 2 Battlefront games because I love Star Wars. I used to drink
There will never be a Battlefront 3, and that's super sad because like I heard
Jar Jar
a lot of people like Battlefront. There was a Battlefront 2, and I think some people would still play like the new Battlefront 1 and 2, but there'll never be Battlefront 3
Binks' head as a kid.
because the social awareness of like the new ones being so bad, and they can just keep milking the old second one by putting on Steam and still having those servers up. You don't really see a need to make a third one,
The bike I learned how to ride on had
Which they should make a third one. They can capitalize on a lot of the new Star Wars shows and everything, like Mandalorian, The Acolyte, etc., but like they won't because Disney.
his face on it. And I understand on almost every level they are mechanically stellar productions. DICE's Battlefront 2 cost an alleged $200-something million to create. Its sound design is only matched by the films it owes its name to, but I feel nothing when I play them. I have like 5 hours played across the both of them. They're just flat in a way. I don't know. I love Batman. I think Jeff Loeb's Hush is one of the greatest works of comic writing this century. I have a Mask the Phantasm poster behind my right shoulder. No, the other shoulder. But like, I remember one moment out of all the Arkham games, which I own 4 of, and it's because they're just fine. Inoffensively good. I don't mean to sound like...
I like Arkham City the most, though. Like, I get Asylum being kind of like, it exists, but City is like one of the best superhero games of all time, so I kind of agree with you there. I don't know, like, I remember a lot of shit about the fucking City games. Me fucking flying around, fighting the big, bulky Joker. Oh no, that was Asylum, not City. I remember the Catwoman stages being like, oh come on, I want to fucking play as the Batman again. I remember every time I did a fucking mission in Arkham City, the fucking Corey Burton says in the speaker, Protocol 10 will begin in 2 minutes, or whatever. It's like, man, that has some like progression to it, you know what I mean? It was, and then I played Arkham Knight, and I'm like, I fucking hate this.
Like Old Man Yells at Cloud either. I think the medium still produces great works, particularly indie games, and I love playing video games just as deeply as the day I discovered them. That'll never change. That's just a physical law of the universe. But I feel like the world of licensed video games especially has just become so much more subdued over the past decade.
Well, they don't fucking make them anymore. That's the big thing, is that like Mad Max and Hotel Transylvania 3, those are kind of the last ones that exist. They're like big console releases. Everything else is a mobile game.
More even-toned, less dynamic. Shadow of War is fantastic. Technically, its Nemesis system is beyond genius. Truly, I'm baffled by what its devs were able to accomplish, and the art team absolutely
I will play Mordor and War, don't worry.
killed it. But honestly, Lord of the Rings War in the North held my attention for 8 times as long, and it's a buggy mess with a broken final act, ham-fisted cameos, and as a game wholly unknown by anyone I've ever tried to talk to about it, because it was a licensed hack-and-slash RPG on a minuscule budget, released 10 days before Skyrim. That's a tough break. There are exceptions, of course. Spider-Man, I think Star Wars Dark Souls is sick, although what interests me about it the most, honestly, is that there is a palpable sense that it was released unfinished, but that's actually interesting. You know, that's character. There's some scratch in the paint. Polish silver and it'll shine for you, but polish it too much and you risk damaging the very thing you tried to make perfect. Fuck it. Give me more Nickelodeon Melee clones with no voice acting and royalty-free versions of the music because they couldn't afford the real thing. Give me...
Isn't there a Nickelodeon All-Stars 2 that has like all that in, I think?
An Uncut Gems dungeon crawler made for the price of an imported S14 that plays like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance.
Drawn by a haunting voice.
Give me Paddington the platformer. I want to see a Venom 2 Metroidvania. I need a Dune kart.
Or just a... I could see not a Metroidvania, but I think I could see like a Venom, like a beat 'em up or something. Kind of on the scale of like a Shredder's Revenge. I could see
Racer more than I need to breathe. I am exaggerating slightly. Souls Wars and Spider-Man are sick and should stay. I just want a Parasite RTS that costs the same as a Taco Bell Chalupa Cravings box to exist alongside them. I digress. No matter how clean and well-composed licensed games have become, there'll always be a place in my heart for the 7 Samurai 20XXs and the DuckTales of the world. The truly strange
I tried playing DuckTales on NES. I could not get into it.
creations which helped birth, nearly killed, and then rebuilt the medium I adore so much. And I hope someday they can be strange
The
again.
fucking Scooby-Doo game.
Maybe I just like
I had the GBA version of Scooby-Doo 2. That was a weird one. Ruby Road 2, RBA, Record Road, or whatever.
things that are bad in a way that's good more than I like things that are good in a way that's bad. Or maybe I simply don't like things without flaws because everything and everyone I love are full of them. After all, that's what Halloween's really all about, right? Celebrating the weirdness and the little idiosyncrasies within ourselves and the things we enjoy. A holiday for the imperfect and many cracked
Is that fucking Conan?
vessels. Because at the end of the day, it's the imperfections that make life
Hey, there's a little Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man 1. It's so good.
memorable.
Like,
Anyways,
everyone talks about Spider-Man 2 being like the best, like Spider-Man 2 the movie game being like the best Spider-Man game, but like I like Spider-Man 1 a lot. It's fucking jank and weird, but I like it a lot. But yeah, that was that video. I will try to play more licensed games sometime soon. Like there's a lot of PS2 games I want to try, and some of them are like licensed stuff I've never beaten. So hopefully I can take some time to like actually beat them, you know.